Imagine you had a wheel set on a central axis and you needed to turn it in a clockwise manner, very much like what we have here. Now, you could set up one person on one side of the wheel to push it in a clockwise manner, but you'd be doubly helped if you set up another person on the other part of the wheel pushing in a clockwise manner as well. Now, if you take the wheel away and you just look at what's going on top down, it looks like these two forces are actually acting against each other. Notice how they're going in opposite directions. But because of the way a wheel works, these are actually supporting and helping one another. This is called opponent processing, when you have two mechanisms that work against each other but are actually helping each other by virtue of the fact that they're working against one another. A similar example in the human body of opponent processing is the human arm. The bicep and the tricep are opponent processes. They actually work against each other. But if you were all bicep and no tricep, that wouldn't be very good. And if you were all tricep and no bicep, that wouldn't be very good either. The opponent processing actually helps the arm to work correctly. But here's the question I want to ask you. If I was to remove the wheel in the center, delete it entirely, and I was to shift this picture from 2 dimensions into 1 dimension, what would this actually look like? Well, what you would get is this. You would get two forces that look like they're acting against one another. Because you've taken one of the dimensions out, you have actually led to two forces that are in opposition to one another. We have plenty of examples of this in our society and culture. So, when it comes to politics, we often talk about individual identity. And one force from one side of the equation loves to emphasize the individual. After all, this person is what matters. That person, that person. However, there's another group of politicians that like to emphasize group identity. It's not so much this person or that person that matters, the individual, but instead what matters is the groups to which that individual belongs. And in a one-dimensional world, these two act in opposition to one another. Here's a very important concept for us to understand. When dimensions are removed, opponent processing looks like tribalism. You have to understand this. So much of what our world is doing in terms of its tribalistic fights is opponent processing on a reduced dimension. This is actually a perennial issue in philosophy. I could just as easily map the questions of the one and the many right on top of these individual political battles. Is it all the individuals that matter and their individual interaction in society? Or is it the group that matters? The one, the singularity that matters the most? Again, opponent processing, when a dimension is removed, looks like tribalism. If we want to scroll down and look at this, we can actually map this onto many philosophical issues that have come down to us through the ages. Now, the thing I want you to see here is that this tribalism is perpetuated by virtue of the fact that both of these systems devolve into reductionism. What is reductionism? Reductionism seeks to say that everything can be reduced down to this one lens or this one way of looking at the world. I, as a Christian, reject reductionism in all of its forms, and it exists over here and it exists over here as well. We are not reductionists, but here's my problem. Protestants, what I think we need to be doing in Christian theology right now is embracing all of this holistically. This is actually done through realism, okay? Metaphysical realism. Now, some people might think that I'm trying to take the middle road when I reference realism, that I'm trying to navigate between two hard or difficult things, that I'm saying we don't want to be too extreme over here or too extreme over here, therefore realism. Not the case. This is not the kind of realism that I am advocating for. That would actually be simply another form of reductionism. Instead, I am advocating for realism from a both and perspective. What do I want to do? Let's add back in the second dimension. Rather than talking about everything one-dimensionally,